So, obviously, the three questions. First of all, thank you to everyone for being here. You know, the media attention, I think, is very, very important so that the general supporters, the public, know what we're going to try and do. In terms of our initial objectives with the team, the nature of international football is that there's one primary objective, and that is to win football matches. You know, that has to be the first and foremost. We have two games coming up against the Seychelles and against Gabon. Two very different challenges, two very different teams, and we have a very short time. But our aim is to bring the players together. That process has already begun. Over the last week, I've spoken to maybe 40, 45 of our players who've been involved over the last 2 years, 3 years, even some of the young guys who are coming through from the U20s that had success last year. So we're already in communication. They know what my style, what I expect of them is. And also I know what they expect, because a big question for them was, what do you want to see happen with the team? You know, what are your objectives as individuals for the team? And so, yeah, for us, we mentioned in the presentation, we want to move forward, we want to improve, we want to win football matches. There will be, stylistically, a little bit of a evolution with the team. You know, the team has done very, very well over the last 5 years, you know, historically well. And now, can we improve on it? Can we take the team forward? Can we make us maybe more dominant in games, more, I don't know, creative in games? And yeah, in terms of my background, I think I've worked in many different countries. And I think one of the biggest assets I have is adaptability. You know, it no longer gets asked. The question no longer gets asked of how will you succeed in this country every time I go to a new country. Because before, maybe someone would say, when I went to Asia, oh, you've not worked in Asia before. Will your success in West Africa translate to Asian football? When I went to East Africa, again, the question was, okay, yeah, you've had success in the West and in Asia and in Europe, but do you know East African football? But again, we were successful. So I think my career has been sort of rubber stamped by adaptability and ability to be flexible so that I can bring my standards and my ideas, but also sort of incorporate myself into the local culture and the local DNA of a country and a club and a federation. So I think my adaptability is one thing that I can always rely on, that I learn very quickly from the people around me. And also, having spent 5 years in Sierra Leone, I think that will play an important role in my adaptation here in the Gambia, because yes, every country is unique. But I also know, speaking to people, that Sierra Leone and the Gambia, whilst there's a few borders between us, there is a lot of similarities between the two cultures, between the two countries, between just how people are in their daily lives. And so I think my experience in Sierra Leone, both in everyday life as well as with the national team, is one that will help me get settled in very quickly here. But yeah, our objective is to win straight away, and also win in the long term and qualify for tournaments and go deep into tournaments. Our ambition is to ask the players who've been there over the last few years to do even more in the coming years, but also to incorporate the young guys. You know, the young guys from the U20s, the young guys, some who weren't even part of that U20 squad last year, who also have huge potential. So, yeah, it's going to be an exciting journey. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I believe the players are really looking forward to it. And I hope the supporters are really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Coach. Next question.
Thank you very much. I'm Santi First of all, thank you, Coach. And in your deliberation, you tried to say regards to the young players about 23 times. Their incorporation is very important. And based on your philosophy, are you going to try to incorporate them in order to receive
No, thank you very much. I think if you look at my career, I've never been afraid to incorporate young players. In fact, if you go back to the very beginning of my professional career with Sierra Leone, in the opening match, we had a World Cup qualifier against Tunisia, and we gave a debut to a 16-year-old George Kweku Davis, who at the time had not even played a Sierra Leone Premier League game. He was still at an academy in Sierra Leone, but we knew, we could see there was a sparkle, and we knew he had to play, and he was man of the match against Tunisia that day. And so I'm never afraid to incorporate young players. However, it is interesting to note, there's always, people like new things. The nature of the human nature is we all like new things. We like to buy a new car, we like to buy a new phone, a new watch. The new thing is what we all like. But we shouldn't be so quick to discard the reliable thing, the thing that has served us well in the past. This current group of Gambian players have served this nation incredibly well over the last 5 years. They also have a fantastic age profile. At the most recently concluded AFCON, there was only 3 or 4 players who were in their 30s in that squad. Gambia has a huge number of players in the national team pool between the ages of 25 and 29. That, in essence, is your peak years. That's where you would expect players to be performing at their best. So, yes, we have young players. Yes, we have the likes of Mamadou Badjo, Alaji Sen, the likes of Bojang, you know, all breaking through, Yankuba, Minte. Great young players breaking through. But they've got to force their way into the team. They have to take the shirt off somebody who has been and is continuing to be successful for the Gambia. So it's a tough decision for a coach. It's a good decision to have. I would rather have more talent than less. But for me, it's about performance. For me, it's about who's playing well, who deserves to have the shirt. And if a 19 or 20-year-old deserves to have the shirt, then he'll get the shirt. And then the onus is on him to play to the level that keeps him in the team. But I think I already said, in the last week I've spoken to around 45 of our players. I've spoken to technical staff. I have spoken to 1 or 2 people who've been here with the Gambia before in the technical staff. I've also spoken to international scouts and people who focus on the Gambia for talent recruitment. Because, look, I'm not just excited about the 19, 20-year-olds breaking through. I've been flagged up some 15 and 16-year-olds who aren't going to be playing in that red shirt for another 4 or 5 years, but who I've been reliably informed by people I trust in the game that they could be the next big stars of African football. And they're only 16 years old now. So it's a very exciting future, and, you know, we'll name the squad later in the week. Some of the young guys are going to get their opportunity. I think the average age of the squad later in the week that you see will be around 24 years old. So it's a young profile to the squad, but we also have high expectations of the guys who've been there and done it over the last 5 years. And I expect most of them to join us on this journey, at least for the next 2 years, if not for the next 4 or 5. Oh yeah, technical side. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mixture. For me, technical staff, it's always about making sure you've got someone who has the skills and the competence and the confidence to do the job at a world-class standard. If those people are available in country, we always try and go with that. If there is a gap that we feel we need to fill it in with someone from outside the country, then we bring someone in. But there's also an expectation that we maybe tag them with a young Gambian person so they can shadow them and they can be upskilled and trained, so that in 5, 10, 15 years' time, we don't have to have foreign staff, that the staff of the team can be domestic staff. So, but it's about quality. So yes, we will be bringing, I think we're bringing 3 guys in who I've worked with in the past, but also I've been really delighted to get to know a number of the local staff, and we'll be meeting more this week. Because again, I say this about the players who've been there and done it. These guys on the technical bench have been a huge part of the success that the Gambia have achieved over the last 5 years. And their experience, their quality, their cultural understanding, which is something I don't have at this moment in time, the cultural understanding of the Gambia, I'm going to rely on that massively, and they're going to be a big part of any. I've spoken to around 45 players this last week, all sort of 5 to 15 minutes each. But also my lists on my computer, I've probably got about 70, 75 players who are all Gambian, like born in the Gambia, playing in sort of top tier, second tier leagues around Europe and the world. And then I've got another list of around 20 players who are born abroad, so maybe they're Swedish, Danish, American, English, but have Gambian parents. And we haven't touched that second list yet, because the process of having someone come to play for the Gambia, it's not, you just don't call them up. Especially if they've played for another youth national team, the process with FIFA can take 2 or 3 months at times to do that transfer of association. So with me only coming in the last, like today officially, but in terms of my work behind the scenes, the last couple of weeks, there was no value in going down that road right now. After this camp, we'll start looking at those players. But for me, one of the big things about, everyone gets excited about foreign-born players. But the first question I always ask when I have conversations with someone in the diaspora who is born to maybe a Gambian parent is, what do you feel? Do you feel Gambian or do you feel English? Do you feel Gambian or do you feel Swedish? And that's an important point, because even though your bloodline maybe traces you to a place, is that place part of your DNA in terms of who you are as a person? Because I've had players in the past for different national teams. I've been very successful at having players come and play, whether it's for Sierra Leone, for Uganda, for Rwanda, who were born abroad. But I've also met players who, even though a parent was from the country, they didn't feel a connection to the country. They felt English or they felt American. And when we tried to incorporate them, it just didn't work, because a former captain of mine for the Rwanda national team said, he always used to say it, he said, when you step onto that field, you've got to be willing to die a little bit for your country. And if that country of your heritage isn't sort of seeped into your marrow, into your bones, are you going to go out and die a little bit for it? And so for me, whether you're born in the Gambia or whether you're born outside of the Gambia, we will always consider you. But we want to know that you will put the interests of the Gambia and its success on the world stage at the front of your agenda. It's not the second, third, or fourth thing. Yes, you will have personal success, but it has to be part of going forward with this nation, with this team. So we'll have those conversations. There'll be some guys who are maybe playing at a very high level of the game who don't come on board because they don't have that passion, and that's okay. It's okay to be born in England and feel English, yeah? But we want to know that representing the Gambia is something special for you. And so, yeah, that'll be a process we go through. But the Gambia is a very unique place. You look at a lot of the young players who are breaking through for other big nations, like Ghana, like Nigeria, like Ivory Coast, and a lot of them are born abroad. But actually, you look at a lot of the young Gambian players who are breaking through in Europe, and they're born here in the Gambia. They grew up here in the Gambia. And that's fantastic, because that means they are already seeped in the traditions, the culture, you know, the mentality of Gambian football and Gambian culture. So that's a real special thing to have so many Gambian born and bred players breaking through all around the world. And final question was the local league. I'm a big believer in local football. In fact, I think this afternoon I'll be at a game. I think this week I'll probably try and get 4 or 5 games under my belt before we head off to training camp. And over the year, look, my time is going to be split between here and Europe. We've got a lot of guys playing every weekend in Europe, and so it's easier when you're based in Europe to jump on a $100 flight to go to Italy or go to Denmark or go to England, whereas if you were flying every weekend from the Gambia, I think it might bankrupt the federation if we were to do that. So it makes financial sense, but also I want to spend a good amount of time here in the Gambia to watch the local league. Now, I'm not going to promise you that there's going to be 5 or 6 guys from the local league, the Gambian top division, in the squad every time. Because you mentioned something about, a player in the past who maybe scored 20 goals locally. But we got to talk about levels. We got to talk about levels. What is better? A striker who is playing and scoring 20 goals in the local league, or a striker who's playing 10 games in the French top division and scoring 3 or 4 goals? Because where do you rate the Gambian league compared to the French Ligue 1? And would that player in the Gambian league, if he transferred to a French top tier team, would he still score the 20 goals? If you brought that player scoring 5 goals, well, let's take an example. I don't like Nice maybe calling players, but let's take Adama in France. Adama's made 7 substitute appearances, and he hasn't scored yet. But if he was here still playing in the Gambian National League, he would probably have played 35 games and scored 25 goals. So as a coach, that's the balance we've got to strike, is where are we calling the players from? What I will say is we will always be tracking the local league. I spoke to Alaji, the assistant coach, earlier, and said we want to develop a database where we know the top 2 or 3 players in every position in the league. I spoke with the head of the Coaches Association earlier. Later this week, I'll be meeting with all of the top division and I think second division coaches to explain what we want to do going forward and how they can play a role in making sure I know who all the top talent breaking through is. And I think through that, we'll also really develop the Chan team, because I know here in West Africa, the Chan tournament isn't taken maybe as seriously as it is in Eastern and Northern Africa, but it's a great development tool, because maybe, especially with it being home-based players, it gives them an opportunity to go and compete at a really good level. It's the most scouted tournament in the world, Chan, and so those players get that opportunity to be seen. So we'll be keeping a very close eye. We'll be keeping our lists. I'll be discussing with coaches, with my staff, with the coaches of clubs. And yeah, we really want to develop the Chan team, and through that, a process for the best local talent to get an opportunity with the senior Scorpions. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Let's get, I'm given the mic.
Good morning. Congratulations for joining the club now.
Thank you.
I personally have read your biography of very impressive. Wish you success with you and the Gambia. My name is Michael from Star TV. My first question is, given the growing expectations surrounding Gambian football after recent success, what coaching philosophy or style do you believe will best fit the current squad to sustain their performance and reach new heights? The other question is, what particular strength and quality do you believe you will bring to the senior national team that will help elevate their performance on the international stage? Because previously, we are having issues here whereby players without club are called for national duty without proper explanation.
No, thank you very much for the questions. So stylistically, there is going to be an evolution. I think it's really important to say that the last 5 years of Gambian football have been exceptional. You know, the levels, the coaching staff, some who are still with us, and the players have reached is phenomenal. It really is. The explosion in football in the Gambia is something that I think when we all take a step back, we can really appreciate. We can really appreciate to say, hey, for the last, since the inception of international football here in the country, the Gambia had never qualified for an African Cup of Nations, and then in the last 2 editions, to go to both of them, to get to a quarterfinals of one, we're still on, yeah. To get to a quarterfinals of one of them is like, that's really good. There's a lot of top nations around the continent who haven't been performing like that. So for the Gambia to elevate themselves to the top table of African football and be competitive, I think we have to have a huge amount of respect. From an outsider looking in, looking at the games, being aware of the players. I think it's fair to say that the last few years have seen a more of a defensive approach from the team. But I also don't think that can be criticized. I think it was probably the absolute right thing to do, because you have to learn to win first. That's the first thing. Players have to learn to win. And over the last 5 years, the technical bench and the players have learned how to win. They've learned how to be tough. They've learned how to grind out results. They've learned how to go to difficult away venues and pick up important points. And that is just fantastic. And what it also gives me is this great platform of a group of players who have that resilience, that toughness, to know how to be in a position to win football matches right until the last minute. And this is the foundation I want to build on. But my tagline that I said to you at the beginning, forward, together. And as a playing strategy, that's also a tagline. We want to go forward. When we're attacking, we want to go forward together, not one or two players on the breakaway. When we're defending, we want to go forward, not backwards. We want to go forward together. We've got remarkably fast players in the offensive line who have been used very well in a counter-attacking philosophy for a while now. And we still have that in our locker. Maybe we've got to go away to Cairo and play Egypt, and we have to employ a more counter-attacking style for one-off games. But the other thing fast attacking players can do is they can go and press the game. They can go and get in people's faces. They can make it uncomfortable for defenders. And we want to do a little bit of that. So it doesn't happen overnight. I'm not Harry Potter. I'm not a magician. I don't click my fingers and overnight we change the style. But we will work towards it. We'll work to be in a higher positional area on the field, further away from our own goal. We'll look to be more intense, more aggressive, but always having those excellent foundations that have been put in place over the last 5 years. So, yeah, I think, and the players know this. It was one of our conversation points on our phone call, and I think the players are excited about it. I think they're enthusiastic about coming in and being part of that type of Gambian team moving forward. In terms of player selection, there is the rule and there's the exception to the rule. I hope you'll agree. If you look at my history, I've coached 3 national teams. I might be missing one person out, but I don't think I've ever called up someone who didn't have a club. So that's in sort of 6-7 years of international management and almost 60 games and a few tournaments. I don't think I've ever called up someone who didn't have a club. Now, there might be someone who maybe his contract finished in June or May and the game was in June and he was negotiating for a new club. There might be an exception to the rule like that in there, and maybe there'll be an exception to the rule like that with the Gambia. But for me, you've got to be playing. You've got to be playing. You've got to be playing regularly for your club. Now, a previous question, we talk about levels. What's better, 30 games in the Egyptian second division or 10 games in the English Championship? Levels, so maybe you pick the player with less games because he's at a higher level. But in general, everyone will be fit, everyone will be playing, everyone will be ready to compete. This coming squad, you'll see it later in the week, we've got a few challenges because there's a few injuries, so we've got to have a few players who have less appearances recently. But in general, playing, competing, performing, and ready to do well in a red shirt. Yeah.
Thank you. Behind you, yes. I'll come to you.
Morning.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
To begin with, my first question is,
Your name first, please.
Tijane School, please. Tijane School.
Tijane?
School.
Which medium do you represent?
Yes, to begin with, my first question is, what are going to be your key priorities as you are officially involved? The second question is, you did mention about togetherness. What steps are you going to ensure that togetherness runs within your movement? Thank you.
So I'll answer the second one first, togetherness. For me, togetherness starts with honesty. It starts with honesty with everybody. I know there's a lot of people, I'm maybe blessed with a certain set of skills that I don't like having difficult conversations, but I will always have them. And I think the first step towards a group of people who are truly together is being willing to have difficult conversations. You know, if players and staff know what I'm thinking, they won't always like what I'm thinking. You know, it's not always going to be, not every conversation you can have in life or in sport is a nice conversation. Sometimes there's difficult, tough conversations to be had. But I'm a big believer that if you have those conversations and you have them early on at the right time, then people can react to them. They can do something about it. Whereas if I don't tell you what I'm thinking, how can you react? How can you change what you're doing? How can you respond in terms of your performance? So I think that honest, open relationship I have with everybody is something that allows them to perform at their best. And also they then see that I'm not telling the person to my right one thing and the person to my left another thing. Everyone knows where they stand with me. And we do it in a fair way, we do it in a sort of a camaraderie way where we're all together. And then, yeah, players, it sets the expectations. So it brings people together. But the other thing is about having standards. You know, there's a great saying that I love that says, the thing that you walk past becomes the standard. And what that means is we can have all the rules and the code of conducts we like, but let's say the rule is you're not allowed to drop trash, but I see someone throwing a bottle down, and I walk past and don't say anything about it. But now that's the rule. It doesn't matter what's written on the piece of paper. It doesn't matter what I say. It's what I live. And so for players, it's about upholding those standards. If people drop below the standards, it's letting them know it. It's about rewarding those players who deserve it. And so that everyone knows, hey, if I'm playing, if I'm working, I'm committed, I'm going to get my chance under this coach. And that fosters that togetherness. In terms of priorities, it's multifold. We got to win football matches. We got a game against the Seychelles in, 2 weeks now? And we got to go out and get 3 points. We've then got to travel to Gabon 3 days later and try and pick up points in Franceville. So, it's a big start. It's encouraging the conversations I've had with the players, but it's about winning early. It's about integrating some of the young guys when that's possible, but it's also about making sure the guys who've been around a little bit, who've been to 2 African Cup of Nations, have the hunger and the desire to go to a third one.
Thank you. Lavin?
Coach, congratulations on
Thank
your
you.
appointment as new head coach. I am Lavin from Academy. My question is, in the past windows, the Gambia have taken much. In the conversation, have you had anything regarding to respecting international rules when you play better, when you spoke to authorities before taking your national team? The second question is, as the Gambian boy has applied the role of this job, you are selected as the head coach. I can make understand that you have also been in contact with him. Is he going to be part of your backroom staff?
Okay, you're going to find out something about me. I love when questions aren't quite factually accurate. So obviously the last 2 windows, one of them was in March where there was no friendlies played, but the previous window was the African Cup of Nations where the team very much did play. So it's only 1 window that they haven't played, not 2. But yeah, I think that was probably lost in the mire of appointing a new coach, really. Speaking to the government officials, speaking to the federation officials, there's a commitment there that we will, if there are no competitive games in a window, that we will endeavour to play friendly games. That's their commitment to me. Obviously, there probably isn't too many opportunities over the next 12 months for friendlies, because if you think about it, we've got qualifiers now, and then the African Cup of Nations draw will be coming up soon, and so September, October, November will all be African Cup of Nations qualifiers, and then when you get back into next March, you're back into World Cup qualifiers. So I haven't sort of looked beyond the next 12 months, but there's probably not too many opportunities for international friendlies, but we'll try and get them in when possible. There was the potential we would play one ahead of the Seychelles game, and we had an offer from a West African nation, or a Central African nation, sorry. But I personally turned it down because I felt having 5 days on the field coaching the players as the very first point of contact was more valuable than a friendly match. Because when you play a friendly match, how hard you train, how much you do, has to come down because there's a game in the middle of it. And so I really wanted 5 good quality days on the training pitch. But the offer was there from the Federation that if we wanted to, we could have played a game before we played the Seychelles. It was just a Central African country. Yeah, that was my personal decision not to play that game because at the very beginning, we need to get on the training field. The guys have already spoken about how there's going to be a slight change in philosophy, and we only implement that change in philosophy if we're on the training ground. And so we needed that at the very beginning. Oh, sorry. Oh, well, I'll refer back to previously. We're going to confirm the staff when we do the squad in the next few days.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mckinstry. Thank you so very much for speaking to us. I am Mohamed of Foreign Radio. My first question is congratulations once again for winning the Gohamana League, the Kenyan League. You've done fantastically well. What motivated you to apply for this vacant job to become the head coach of the Scorpion? That's the first question. And the second one is that your first match is to take on Seychelles on the 8th of June. And 3 days later, on the 11th, you take on Gabon. What have you put in place ahead of those 2 matches? Because they are very, very crucial for the Scorpions of the Gambia. The Gambia is yet to register a single victory in this World Cup qualifier. And the third question is that you have worked under Alex Ferguson over the years in youth development as well as Newcastle United. How has that experience will help you to build a very formidable team that will compete at that higher level on the African continent for the Gambia and the Gambians as well? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so in terms of why the Gambia, it was an interesting one. In football, I think it's not surprising that when you're having successful periods, there is offers and interest, you know, from different places. And actually, as we approached the end of this football season with Gor Mahia in Kenya, and it was becoming quite clear that we were going to win and now have won the championship for the 2nd year in a row, there was various inquiries and various opportunities sort of presented to me. And from all over the world, you know, actually, even in accepting to come here to the Gambia, I had written contract offers from a couple of teams in Asia. And there was even another international team who, whilst it hadn't progressed to the level of formal talks, they'd shown an interest. But football is always the thing that defines it for me. I'm not so money motivated. You know, yes, it's important. You've got to feed your family. You've got to pay the rent. But for me, it's always about the footballing opportunity. I think had I taken one of the opportunities in Asia, it would have been an easier life. I think it would have been an easier life. But when I looked at the players here in the Gambia, and especially the young players, I thought, yeah, I want to be on a football pitch with those guys. I want to take my character and my philosophy of the game and my personality, and I want to see if that can have a positive influence on some of these players. I always think about life, there's a right time, right place, right person combinations, like a Venn diagram, all of them come in together. And I just look at who I am as a person and the way my teams play football, and I think, as I believe the Federation and the government decided, that I'm exactly the right person for this moment in Gambian football. I really felt that together we can achieve even more than's went in the last few years. And sorry, what was the other question now?
The question is at this short period that you are supposed to take yourself
Oh,
on
yeah.
the 8th of next month and next 3 days later you take on Gabon.
Yeah.
What are the plans that you put in place ahead of those days?
So the plans, one thing you need to know about me is I quite like giving my coaching staff in general a bit of space and sort of a remit to go and coach. You know, I know sometimes you get head coaches come in and they do everything, and the assistant coaches, you know, really are just there to help clear up. That's not how I work. The way I work is I want all of my coaching staff, the sports science staff, the medical staff, everyone has to be doing their job. Otherwise, what's the point of them being there? You know? And so, you know, I'm a big believer in giving people their own space and their ability to go and do the job, and then have a high expectations of them doing that job. I will say it might not be quite fully incorporated in the first week because it's such short time, and obviously everybody, the coaching staff and myself and the players, have got to learn about each other. So I've got a very clear picture of what the training camp will look like this week in terms of how we'll go about training, in terms of how we'll go about our meetings off the field, on the field, to get us in the best possible position to pick up maximum points. It's not going to be easy because it is a short period of time, but look, that's international football. In fact, I actually think we're very blessed because last time out when I was Uganda coach, we kept getting given Wednesday or Thursday fixtures, which, as the coaching staff will know, when players are flying in on the Monday and you only have 1 or 2 training sessions before you've got to play an international game, it's really difficult. But we've been very blessed this time around that the first game's on the Saturday, and so we've got the entire week in good facilities up in Morocco to be able to go and, you know, do some really good work on the training pitch and at the hotel. So we're going to get a lot done in the first week, and we're going to be ready to play against the Seychelles, and then it's a quick turnaround to get out to Gabon. But yeah, I'm confident the guys will be in good shape for it, and yeah, we'll try and build as much as we can in the first few days.
Your predecessor has been in the habit of unveiling the national team of this country out of the Gambia. Are we going to see a different approach from you, where you can be coming in the country and unveil the national team of this country?
Yeah, I think it's about being realistic to the exact moment we find ourselves in at any given point. Because what would you, well, maybe not what would you, what would the players prefer? Would they prefer, you know, a flight being paid so I can come and do a press conference, or would they prefer to have protein shakes or, you know, the stuff that we want for the national team? Because as much as we have to understand that in everything in life there is a budget attached to it. That budget is not endless, okay? I think the government do very, very well here. They invest in the national team, they support the national team, but we also have to understand that they also have other things they've got to spend money on here in the Gambia. Yeah? So when it is possible for us to do things like this, I want to be able to do it. Yeah? I want to be able to spend a good amount of my year here in the Gambia, because that will allow me to stay on top of the local league and to work with the Coaches Association, to work with my technical staff here in the country. But it's also important for me to go and spend time with our players playing around Europe and around the world. Both of those things are important. Now, if we are playing, say we've got a double away game, and the players in essence will never come to the Gambia, is it good use of resources to fly me in that example, to do a press conference? Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully by the end of the year we're playing home games again. I know the renovations of the Independence Stadium are moving well, and I'm told hopefully before the end of the year we'll be hosting games again. And then when we're doing training camps in country, etc., of course this all becomes very, very natural, and it's all part of the same budget. You're not spending the money twice. So, you know, it comes down to what the budget is. If there's a budget there that can't be better spent elsewhere, then I've got no problem being here. But will that happen every time? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But it's about spending the money wisely and making sure we get maximum benefit for that finance.
All right. More to this.
Good afternoon. From my distance. My name is Jana from the Gambia Radio Television Services. Welcome to the Gambia. Are you ready to speak?
Am I ready to?
Sting, Scorpion.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Most of my questions were asked by colleagues. Two questions. I have just asked two ones. Often coaches would advertise. You have only 2 days to prepare for the first game. And you're coming at the time when the Scorpions are on a losing streak of 5 years in a row. Do you need time to settle in with the team to get ready to go?
So the thing about time really is a two-sided coin. It's a two-sided answer. We expect to win now, so we're going to go into these games and do everything we can to win. There's no point me asking for time when time does not exist. You know, we don't live, I said I have honest conversations with people, you know, we don't live in a fairy tale movie. We've got 5 days on the training ground to get the team prepped to win a football match. And so we're going to go out and do everything we can to do that. In terms of where we're taking the team, because this is not, you know, any journey has a beginning, a middle, and an end, okay? And in terms of my playing style and the character that I want the team to play with, they always say a team should reflect their coach. And so I hope that in time, you will see my character and my core values and the things I consider important in life represented by how the Scorpions play. Will that happen in 5 days? No. That takes more time to really imprint at a deep level the DNA and the playing style that we want. That won't happen in 3 or 4 days. But can we win in 3 or 4 days? Absolutely. And that's the target. We want to go to win next weekend against the Seychelles, and then we're going to go out to Gabon in what will be a very hostile, difficult environment, and we're going to try and win there as well. But yeah, how we win in week 1 might be quite different to how we win in week 60, the style of it. So yeah, international football is that. There's no point. We all want more time. In international football, you're not going to get it. You're simply not going to get it. In terms of the players, really excited to be working with them. You know, I've spoken, like I said, to almost all of them. And it's funny, when people bring up money, in my experience, the footballers who earn the most money are the most dedicated and the most professional. I remember when I went to Sierra Leone many years ago, people told me not to take the job. I was only 27 years old. That was 12 years ago. It's hard to think. I was 27 years old, and I walked into a dressing room of people playing for Celtic, for AC Milan, for Malmo, for Chicago Fire, for Norwich City, for Bolton Wanderers. You know, a top team earning top money. And everybody said to me, oh, these guys, they're all about the money. Do you know what? They were the best group of players ever. You know, not a single problem with them. Because do you know how you get to earn the big contract? You do it by being the most disciplined professional. If you think you can earn the big contract and be paid the top money in football by being unprofessional, by being careless, by being casual, that just doesn't happen. So, yeah, I'm expecting the players, from what I've spoken to already, they're going to be very good. And, yeah, we're just looking to get out on the pitch with them and get to work.
My final question, there have been instances in the past where there have been fallout between the coach and the previous coach with some players. Some of whom have been got caught up at some point. Are you calling a first stage? I'm not sure if you know about this, but are you extending invitation to all players on board?
Yeah, like the door is always open. Again, I also think this is, you know, there's stuff that happens inside the house and stuff that happens outside the house. It's a bit like a football team is very much like a family and a marriage. You know, the stuff that goes on between you and your wife in the house, most of your friends don't know the exact details of it. They think they know, and they might talk and whisper and rumors, but the picture that's out in the world is never what you and your wife know actually happened. And that's a little bit like a football team. The private conversations that we have and the relationships you have with players are often not well reported in the media, because just like in a marriage, things, you know, happen between people that the outside world doesn't really know the full picture of. So for me, everyone is welcome. You know, I'll make my own decisions on players. You know, for me, I have never, I think, fallen out with a player in my career. Doesn't mean I pick them. Not picking a player doesn't mean you've fallen out with them. It just means international football is a bit like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. You need all of the right pieces to click together to make this beautiful picture at the end of the puzzle. And an international team's like that you need the right pieces to go together. Now, there might be another piece that's a fantastic piece, but does it fit in with this picture that we're trying to put together? And so that often will be the determining factor on whether we call players up, is are they right for the group? Are they ready to play? Are they ready to work? Personal relationships, it tends to be professional. You know, I'm there to support the players. I want them to grow. I want them to be the best that they can be on and off the field. And yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. The door's open for absolutely everybody, but they've got to fit into the puzzle that we're trying to put together. Yeah.
All right, well, with that, we will come to the end of this press conference. It's been a great time talking to the head coach. In fact, the journalists were the ones calling for the end of the press conference, so that is definitely a good note to start on, and it shows Johnny's commitment to working with all of you, and ensuring that he gives everyone his due, his or her respect. So as he said, I would